Good morning, everybody. I hate to stop the good conversation going on, but the chair detects a quorum, and I want to call to order the regional council body of the Greater Nashville Regional Council. It is Wednesday, August the 20th, 2025. We do have a quorum, as I said, and the minutes were emailed to you ahead of time. And as soon as you're ready, I'll entertain a motion in a second. Thank you, Mayor Moore. Do I hear a second? Thank you, Mayor Anderson. Any corrections, deletions, or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, are you ready to vote? All in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Anybody wish to abstain? The minutes are adopted. Next item on our agenda is opportunity for public comment. Any member of the public wish to address the body? I hear none, so we are now ready for the information items. We have two this morning. The first item, we have a very extra special guest with us this morning. Someone who has won a national award representing the Greater Nashville Regional Council as a most valuable volunteer. Nancy Parker is with us. Ms. Parker, would please stand, and I'm going to ask Rebecca Nope, our volunteer and community engagement manager, to introduce her, describe what has gone on since there you are.
I'm here.
Okay. So Rebecca, you're recognized.
I am not recognized. I am just recognizing Nancy. Wonderful to volunteer. I'm going to read a couple things about her so you can get a good picture about all the wonderful things she does with GNRC. We're really proud that she has been recognized with the 2025 National Outstanding Ship Volunteer Award. That's a national award given by the SHIP program. Eligible are anybody who is volunteering for SHIP within any of the U.S. states or territories. And one volunteer is recognized nationwide. So she's the winner this year. Nancy has been with the SHIP program since July 2013. So has been a volunteer a really long time, providing Medicare counseling to any beneficiaries and their caregivers that need help. We got to surprise Nancy first with the announcement of this award during a director's call. Usually they have a conference, but it was canceled this year. So they did a virtual call and we surprised her and got the footage on video. So that's online there if you all want to see her reaction. Was really wonderful. And then they sent us this wonderful award here in the mail. So we are able to hand that to you today. I'll give that to you now. So just a little bit about Nancy. So Nancy does most months more counseling than our staff. So she is really our, power volunteer. She's really freeing up time for the staff to take care of scheduling, reporting, and administrative planning duties. She's really an incredible force of nature. She seeks a lot of training to stay up on top of all the changes that happen to Medicare each year. She's very patient in her counseling efforts and also when mentoring new volunteers. So she's helped train a lot of new people who want to join the program. She's very good at breaking down Medicare information into language that others can understand. Because most people, I don't know if you've tried to enroll in Medicare or to help the family member, it's a very complicated process. We have data going back to 2019 that's in our current database. And during that time, she has contributed 6,500 hours of counseling. She has conducted over 7,000 counseling sessions, staffed more than 40 informational booths, and given a lot of presentations out in the community. Her counseling sessions have led to 686 plan enrollments, so where she's actually enrolled somebody in a different plan. And those people, she has saved over $2.2 million in prescription drug costs. And that number would be far higher if we also counted all the people that she has given advice to, but that have enrolled on their own, or that are eligible for a lower income assistance program. I want to tell you one story to just sum up her dedication. On April 13, 2022, Christine received a very unusual call from Nancy stating that she would be unable to present at the senior center the following day. A tree had fallen on her roof, destroying much of her house, and she was in danger amid a storm with her home and possessions in shambles around her. And yet she called Christine to make sure that people would get the Medicare information they needed the next day. When Christine called her back, she wanted to discuss the logistics about the presentation and wasn't even worried about everything that was happening around her. And even through all the months of relocation, then repairing her home and still repairing her home and going through iterations there, she has continued to volunteer and really has shown that her unique abilities helping others are really the most important thing for her. So we are really grateful for your service and your dedication to the program. And I'm just very excited to, have you receive this wonderful award and being recognized nationwide too.
I appreciate it. I am a retired nurse. I was a certified case manager. I was literally helping people with Medicare claims in the 70s. And Medicare started in 65, which was the year I graduated from nursing school. So you might say I've grown up with it. So again, I've been around it. I understand the insurance end of it. And that's, again, I know people don't. It's not getting any easier, but we won't go here. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nancy, on behalf of the cities and counties represented here and across our state. Thank you for your outstanding work. All right. We are now ready for the environmental planning initiatives report. Mr. Skipper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank Ms. Parker personally for her dedication to Middle Tennessee. And the numbers that we had on screen are just mind-boggling. The number of hours that she's contributed, the amount of money that she saved Middle Tennesseans in getting into the right drug plan, just really impressive. As we segue into this next item, this is for informational purposes only. We have no action for you today beyond the approval of the minutes. So we wanted to take the opportunity to breathe a little bit with you and kind of reflect on some of the work that we're doing across Middle Tennessee to help improve environmental quality. That means a lot of different things to many people. We've curated select set of activities that we thought would be most interesting to you today. And in a minute, I'm going to introduce some really smart, talented coworkers of mine to talk about some of the things that we're doing across Middle Tennessee. But I'm going to set the stage by saying that the information that we're presenting today is online right now. There is gnrc.org/slide/council. If you want to download a copy to your computer. There's also hard copies going around. And then all the work that we're going to be describing today and all the partnerships that we're going to be sharing with you are encompassed in the recently adopted work program. Back in June, this body met to approve our annual work program and budget. So everything that we were talking about today is itemized and consistent with the program of work that you have all approved. And we appreciate your approval so much. It all stems from the work plan. In terms of our environmental planning initiatives across Middle Tennessee, our efforts are really shaped by two really important inputs. One are the regional planning requirements that are on GNRC to perform on behalf of local governments, state agencies, to meet federal requirements that make you eligible for federal funds to invest in infrastructure and social services within your community. So there are requirements that we have to meet at the federal level, but just about anything we do, we want to make sure it's relevant to you. So that's the other input to our focus is just what's on your mind. What is it that you want to help us explore within your community? How would you like for us to connect you to other partners across the region to solve problems? And so that's the other route that things get on our plate is member input in the interest of our local communities. And so that's what's represented on the slide here. It's just really the reasons why we do environmental planning. A lot of the member input that we're getting in the last few years are really driven by what we see out the window, what you see out your windshield on your commutes about the region. It's just the rapid pace of growth and development. It's putting a lot of pressure on environmental assets, including open space, our water quality, our air quality. Those are the three topics that we're going to showcase today. And our team does a lot to support conversations around these issues, including making sure plans are aligned, not only the plans that we're developing for you as a region, but also as we participate in your local planning process and as we advise the state on their plans. It's our role to make sure that everything is connected and aligned and working in the same direction. We're maybe best known for the work we do in data and analytics. And I introduced at our Transportation Policy Board meeting earlier this month, our new research director who's in the room. I think she'll have a few things to say under the chair's report. But we have a really awesome research staff that does a lot of data analysis. So the publicly available data sets are in their portfolio, but also computer models that predict the future and help you test out the options that you have available to address these solutions to figure out which ones make the most sense for our region. So there's a lot of modeling that goes into the work that we do around data as well. And we have a lot of focused conversations with local stakeholders that are deliberate and intentional for supporting collaboration and making sure that people come to these conversations with an open mind about the problem statements and the solutions that are available to address them. And then ultimately, we're here to be a resource to you. It's not a resource that we can provide directly to help you chase down a resource being provided by a nonprofit, state agency, or the federal government. The last thing I'll do before I turn it over to Jessica Hill, who will talk about our land conservation efforts, which is one of those things that we are asked to look into on behalf of our members. And I remember Mayor Anderson, this being a big priority for you a few years ago that set us on that path to look at conservation strategies. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we help analytically understand where we are and where we're headed with respect to environmental quality. This is a map of our 13 counties plus Murray County, which is engaged in our transportation planning work. So we typically include Murray County in any of the analysis that we're doing for the region. This is looking at environmentally sensitive areas. So this includes sort of natural features, all the wetlands, the floodways, steep slopes, areas that are known to support habitat of endangered rare species, karst topography. That's all captured in this composite map. So a lot of environmentally sensitive areas across the region. These are things that have been defined for us either through natural features or just because locals say this is important to us as an environmental asset. This is a look at where present day land development pattern is encroaching upon those environmentally sensitive areas. There's already a lot of encroachment, just the built environment that exists, encroachment. We've encroached upon those environmentally sensitive areas since we built our first structure in Middle Tennessee. It's unavoidable. But as we continue to grow, it is important that we do look for opportunities to avoid those things that are most precious to us or plan to mitigate our impacts on environmental assets as we continue to develop as a region. This is a map showing you the anticipated encroachment from the growth and development that we're forecasting out to the year 2050. I'll go back to 2023. So this is our base year. The red indicates those areas where development has encroached upon environmentally sensitive areas. This is an expansion of that encroachment out to the year 2050. Many of you have heard us talk about our 2050 population forecast for the region. The state is expected to grow by 1.5 million people between 2020 and 2050, 1.5 million statewide. 64% of that growth is expected to occur within the counties that you all represent. So 2/3 of the state's growth happening here in Middle Tennessee, which doesn't surprise you. We'll see a combined population as a region exceeding 3 million by the year 2050. That's larger than present day San Diego, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Denver, Austin, Baltimore. To give you a visual representation in your head as to what 3 million people will look like. We can't chase all of these things in the work that we do. So the other thing that we try to bring to the table, some sense of order or prioritization to direct our limited resources. And this is a quadrant analysis that our research team put together that mapped areas that are anticipated to develop, the areas that are more likely to develop, and we're looking at that in comparison or with an overlay to those areas that are the most environmentally sensitive. So we're looking for that upper right quadrant on this map. It would be the areas identified in red. Those are the areas that we might want to pay special attention to, areas that are likely to develop with highly environmentally sensitive areas. And again, that's a resource that we bring to the tables to help you prioritize all the challenges that are in front of you, given the limited resources that we have available to address them. So that's the teaser as we get started here. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Hill, our Director of Community Regional Planning, to talk about the work that we've been doing to support conversations around land conservation.
Want me to take the power?
I never had it.
I didn't say that. All right. Well, thank you, Michael. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jessica Hill. I'm the Director of Community Regional Planning here at GNRC. I know most of you all know me. But as Michael mentioned, this was one of the first directives when I started about 4.5 years ago for us to look at that you all gave to us, was really looking around land conservation and farmland preservation. So before I jump in, I want you to think about, as you were coming in today, if you were to ask to explain your community or give like an example of what defines it, what is one place that comes to your mind? Have that. Now, I bet at least one of you, probably more, that place is a farm or a park or a natural area in your community that everybody loves and references back to. Either they recreate there, they look at the beautiful pasture land, but they see it as part of their community and the things that define that. So often, we know some people say that that is just an underutilized piece of land, but that's not true. Those areas have value. They have value in the sense that they have economic value, but they also create that high quality of life that Middle Tennessee residents have come to enjoy and that we want to continue for future generations. So these farmlands and open spaces bring jobs through farming activities. They provide that high quality of life that our residents like to go out and swim and recreate in, but they also help to reduce our costs. So they help provide clean water, provide cleaner air. So there's some economic or environmental value as well as economic value that these bring. And so in case one place didn't come to mind or you haven't had enough caffeine yet today, I wanted to give a few examples of places that we can consider open space. And these range from very rural and state parks like Montgomery Bell Park out in Dixon County to a downtown Nashville park. But also it can be a tobacco farm in Robertson County or a cattle farm out in Wilson County. So the spectrum of what we define as open space is both farmland and natural lands and parks, whether it be active or passive. So when we think about where those places are and what they represent to us and mean to us, looking backwards over the last 20 years, I know we're in 2025, but since 2000, nearly 130,000 acres of land became developed. Rutherford and Williamson counties had the greatest losses, with each of them being over 20,000 acres. And of these areas, is for greenfield developments, that was 60% of that conversion. So most of that is occurring either through our forests or agricultural farmlands. And so to provide a different perspective or another perspective to help understand the magnitude of this conversion, this land conversion, is that since 2015, I think it's, all right, you are now in power. Since between 2015 and 2020, we've lost 150,000 football fields of cropland and 575,000 fields in tree canopy. And that with those losses, we've gained over 660,000 football fields of impervious surfaces. So as you know, impervious surfaces causes stormwater, erosion control, more heat collection, retention versus trees and crop areas. So in our conversations with stakeholders and what's important to our constituents and your constituents in your communities, it's been around the loss of agricultural and farmland. So Tennessee is the fourth most threatened state for loss of ag lands. we're losing over 200 acres of farmland each day to development. And for us in Middle Tennessee, we're expected to lose a third of the state's total agricultural land to development. So not only is this a concern from an environmental perspective, but also an economic loss and food security. But there's also a cost to serve. Your police officers and ambulances are not being called out for cows typically. So there's some value in having those lands. Farmland is not creating, police calls. So I know we don't like to talk about losses, but some of the recent losses that we've had in the region have been related to the increase in population and new housing starts. So low density residential is the largest consumer of our open space and ag lands at 78%. So with the significant population growth during the pandemic, we've seen those losses add up and build. But not to say on the flip side, we've done some good things. In 2018 in Hendersonville, the city purchased 35 acres for Beatty's Farm to preserve as a public park. Gallatin purchased 70 acres to preserve as public parks. And Williamson County in 2020 actively reduced their minimum lot size for a significant portion of the county from 1 acre to 5 acre minimum lot sizes through their zoning regulations. And then just this May, Governor Lee signed the Tennessee Farmland Preservation Act to provide permanent conservation easements and funding to support farmers that are willing to put their land into those easements. So as Michael mentioned, one of the things that GNRC staff is doing is we have a phenomenal research and analytics team that analyzes national data sets to look at land cover, to understand the trends that we've seen historically, but we also do modeling and forecasts out to the future, knowing the population and job growth that we're anticipating, the ways that you all have planned your communities through your long-range comprehensive plans to understand where we can anticipate seeing the population and development occur at the parcel level, which helps inform our decisions as we look for policy regulations and long-range plans at the regional level, but also at the local level. So we align those recommendations and priorities in GNRC's plans to the regional transportation plan, through the CEDS, the community and economic development strategy, but also as we work with you all at the local level, we have identified some policy recommendations that may be beneficial if this is an area of interest for you. And we do that through peer review. So looking at what other places have seen success in implementing. And I know some of you were here when we presented a very robust inventory. I won't go through the whole thing, but other than to say that we've looked at across the nation at best practices, and we've done an inventory of what if each jurisdiction in our region has adopted those best practices. We're happy to share this with you. But to simplify it for this morning, a couple of common best practices through that peer review are really around developing and cluster conservation subdivisions. So creating a smaller footprint on development and preserving larger areas for open space, identifying and planning for those priority areas to preserve open space. So that map that Michael shared earlier around the environmentally sensitive areas, we know where they are. How can we now take action to preserve those? And then those methods of preservation, whether they be tax incentives or local or actions by private property owners through donations or easements. Now, we all have shared challenges. This region is growing, land values are increasing, there's a higher acreage price point, and we know that public funding takes time, and often developers can move a lot quicker than we can as government. And local and private resources are limited, both not just in funding, but also staffing and capacity. And then there's state regulations that limit planning jurisdictions and authority around creating these ability to conserve land. We all enjoy our property rights. So that there's that balance of public versus private property. But then looking for opportunities, as you're evaluating your local plans, there are opportunities to think about, similar to what Williamson County took action on, minimum lot sizes in your zoning, incentives or best practices for conservation, expanding those regulatory tools and other funding mechanisms, and then guiding growth through your comprehensive plans, your long-range transportation plans, but also your capital improvement plans. We know that infrastructure drives growth. So being very cognizant of your investments in private infrastructure and where those are placed. So bringing back the map that Michael shared earlier, we're tracking these areas that you all may use for as you update your plans or regulations. We're happy to assist in those conversations. So now I'm going to turn it over to Maddie Balls, who is going to shift to a water discussion. And I think I'll say we'll take questions as they come. Yep.
Before you leave, can I give you some more suggestions to tackle?
Yeah, sure.
Go back into the green belt, get the law changed to cut that in half for the ag side. Penalize the developers that buy land and hold it for more than 5 to 7 years for development. Because all they're doing is buying the land, getting the green belt benefits, and doing rollback taxes. Increase the rollback taxes to more. That will cause and help the farmer or the landowner. One example you listed up here does not get into, you have to provide an avenue for and I'm just going to make up the name, a family subdivision. It's an individual that owns 5 or 10 acres, not that's below the green belt. Create that environment so that parents can allow their children to come back. And there are ways to do that, which keeps you out of that subdivision regs, because whether you're in Williamson County or in Robertson County, to come back on your land is very difficult under the zoning we put in place. So you have to create that. There's about 5 that I would suggest you look at. The green belt needs to be tackled and nobody wants to tackle it.
Those involved. Think through those.
Yeah, you mentioned conservation subdivision, and we've gone a little bit further than that. And we call village green, which 70% of the developed property would have to remain an open space. That allows more density, but it all falls back on the land use plan for our communities. And we've always focused more on the most important growth is growth closest to the core of the city rather than out in the hinterlands in the county, because that just creates more sprawl, more traffic.
Mayor Brown.
I was just going to say, I think one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing in Sumner County is that even though we do the things to conserve swaths of land and have large open space associated with development, the headlines that they take from research like yours is loss of farmland, conservation, water quality, all the things that are the detriment. And they totally do not, when I say they, even the media stories are never about, hey, we got to accommodate people. And so how do we put them in houses within our communities? And I always, like I was listening to Mayor Anderson's comments. I see that, but at the same time, like in my community and my family included, we have a very few number of landowners who have, maintained, had notes on their lands for many, many, many decades. There's no family to succeed. They want to do something good with money. They're trying to hold on to their land, but they don't have a path to retirement if they don't sell. And the landowners are becoming the devil. And the reality is that there aren't actual farmers within Gallatin. There are a few people that still allow land to be corn or soybeans planted on, there's no cattle in our community anymore. There are large pieces of land, but they're not being farmed because it's just a farm on that scale in a community like ours, it costs a lot of money to try and run, and there's so much risk. And so the landowners at this point are going, I've got to do something.
So that's a common challenge that we hear, and it relates back to land value. And there are the young farmers out there, but they can't afford to buy the land to farm it. And so we see a lot of this mismatch. And there have been strategies in other places around, public purchasing of the land and conservation, and then selling and holding those rights of development.
Well, I would suggest that the utility of farming is actually an opportunity to pursue, because say someone does purchase 5 acres, the cost to fence that land becomes makes actually growing anything or having cattle not be feasible. Because like in our area, there's not a fenced piece of land remaining, or well, in Gallatin. But you can't grow stuff. You can't have cattle if you don't have fences. And even just there's so much interest in the younger generation about hobby farms or cottage industry farms, but trying to get them started in that is very, very difficult. And they're not going to be farming 150 or 200 acres. They're going to be farming maybe 20.
I hear you. Yep.
One thing I would ask that you could do, just from the research point, it would be really fantastic, kind of what Mayor Brown was saying, is if in this you presented, hey, historically, say 20, 30 years ago, how much of subdivisions actually were dedicated to green space and the active open space, you said, and then we could compare that to today, because obviously there's a larger emphasis placed on it. And that would be a positive that the research would help, and would be really something we could push out that, hey, 20 years ago it was 10%, now it's 30%. And I think that might be a part of the research we're missing, is the improvements we've made, because sometimes that's hard to quantify. So that'd be really helpful for all of us.
Yeah, I'll say, to Mayor Brown's point, that's where conversations that the counties in the room have with their municipalities about urban growth boundaries too. I know farmland conversion gets all the headlines, and we put a lot of emphasis on that because that's what we hear as being important to Middle Tennessee. But the solutions for open space are going to look different whether you're within the urban growth boundary or you're outside of that. The urban growth boundary is essentially us communicating to the world that we intend to build community within these limits. And so open space is going to look like the large tracts of land for farming. It's going to look like the other things that are on the tool set.
That's, I think, a very important component of this is realistic urban growth boundaries with a shared understanding that if you can concentrate your development there, you protect your rural lands.
Yeah.
And we'll have more to say about the research soon. I think you'll be impressed with what they're working on.
You want me to take one more question?
Jessica, we've been through a lot of this together recently. So I think perspective is important, right? And to that question of defining actual agricultural land versus just undeveloped open space, it's critical, and it's not easy, as we found, right? I think these numbers can sound alarming, right? Without proper context, right? So on slide 13 here about the 20,000 acres that have been lost in Rutherford and Williamson, looking at total land mass, if you work that out, that's well less than 0.3% per year over that time frame. The same thing, and I recall the governor's state of the state speaking about that. I think he used the same figure of 200 acres of farmland per day, and that sounds alarming. That's across the country. When you look at the almost 28 million acres across the United States, it's on a similar path, right? We're talking about 2.5% or about 0.0025% annually, right? So I think my question would be, and I'm not a planner, I don't know this from this perspective. At some level, there needs to be a determination of what's an acceptable rate, just with population growth, so that folks have the ability to have family neighborhoods, support the other community needs. I think it would really help as it relates to these media headlines, which sometimes the raw numbers can sound alarming, to really have a good understanding of what's a reasonable rate for that loss, and then also what amount of that loss is actual farmland as opposed to, unusable open space where the soil is very shallow on a lot of limestone rock that we have here in Middle Tennessee. So.
Yeah, and I know, the data says that farmland, cropland is the easiest conversion to residential because it's cleared, it's typically flat, and it's got access to roads. So the places that you're talking about, like the steep slopes, shallow rock, those are hard for both development and farmland and are naturally, I guess, protected a little bit from development because of those constraints. But to your point, I hear you. It's definitely a further conversation.
Well, and as we transition to water quality, I think it's important that you show the numbers. It lets people see what's happening instead of waiting 30 years and realizing, oh crap, we lost a lot of things that we valued about our community. But asking the questions that you're asking are important too, like what is an acceptable rate and what specific locations do you want to try to conserve? Those are local conversations that need to have happen, and you've got to do both of those things at the same
I mean,
time.
when you think about the growth that this region's seen in 20 years, and you step back and you say, at the end of the day, we're only talking about 5% of the landmass of these two counties over that time with that level of growth, right?
Yeah, a lot of people have said they've been negatively impacted by it too. So we also just want to honor the lived experiences that people are having as well. So, well, great conversation. Obviously, that's what we're here for, is to support the work that you're doing to answer those questions about what's the right rate of conversion and what locations does it make the most sense to try to protect from development. Let's switch gears to water quality. We've got water quality. We're going to talk about air quality after that, and then we're going to talk a little bit about brownfield. So we're in for a little bit of a ride this morning, but thanks for your patience. This is all really good information, and Maddie Bowles is up next.
I am excited to be speaking to you today. I'm going to share a little bit about GNRC's water quality work, especially through the avenue of our watershed-based plans. Michael calls this my cold open. If this slide will change, which it's not looking likely. Michael, I think I'm gonna have to rely on you.
Yeah, looks like there's a lag. Let me stop and reshare.
But I guess that just makes it more dramatic for you all then.
Live from Nashville.
Okay, Tennessee has 60,000 miles of streams and rivers. Water is all around us. I'm sure that you all are well familiar with that in each of your communities. My parents are from Mount Juliet, the land of the lakes, so I see all of the rivers and lakes every time I go to see them. And 13% of that stream mileage is located in GNRC's footprint, so in Middle Tennessee. Michael, I'm relying on you again. We have a lot of maps, so it might take it a second. Okay, within the state of Tennessee, streams can be designated for 7 designated uses. And essentially what these designated uses are telling us are what those streams should be able to be used for in a perfect world. Designated uses can look like fish and aquatic life, recreation, domestic water supply, industrial water supply, irrigation, watering livestock and wildlife, and then navigation. And each of those designated uses are associated with different water quality standards. And that makes sense because the water that you're using to water your lawn, you might care about the quality of that water a little bit less than the water that you're actively swimming in, or that your pets or your livestock are drinking. We care a little bit more about the quality of those things than water that just goes on our lawn. And so each of those designated uses are associated with different water quality standards. And when the state looks at streams and rivers in the state of Tennessee, they score them or designate them as fully, partially, or not at all supporting of their designated uses. I'm going to keep going. Within Middle Tennessee, we have around 8,000 miles of rivers and streams, and about 50% of those have been assessed for supporting their designated uses. That means that in our region, about 50% or half of our stream miles, we are not quite sure about their supporting status, and they're sort of neutral. It doesn't mean that they are supporting and good to go for any and all uses, but it also doesn't mean that they're not. It just means that we don't know. And of the remaining 50%, around 52% of the assessed streams in our region are not supporting of their designated uses. For streams that are designated for recreation, that means that if I wanted to go take a swim, I might pull back a little bit before I put on my goggles, because maybe there's a pathogen out there that has a little bit of a high level. And maybe I'm not interested in that, or maybe nutrient levels are really high, and so there's some algal bloom issues that I might encounter if I were to get in that stream. And then we have 11 stream miles in our region, which isn't too many, but those are considered threatened, which means that they're not supporting now, but they're kind of making their way there, and so we want to keep an eye on those. And this is a map of those streams in Tennessee. It's a little bit hard to see, so it'll probably be easier to look at in your packets. But the blue streams that you see up there are streams that are fully supporting, so they are good to go for all of their designated uses. The orange ones are threatened, and the red ones are impaired, so those are not supporting their designated uses. And then you'll see also that there's a lot of those gray ones, and those are the ones that are not assessed. So it's a pretty good mix. And why does this matter for our region? So to begin with, polluted waters have less utility. Like I just mentioned, certain pollutants might cause an elevated risk, not only to humans, but also to wildlife and livestock. And that just means that you can use the water for less stuff, to put it simply. Polluted waters can also lead to economic loss. So polluted waters are more expensive to treat than cleaner waters. And that makes it more difficult to get water from a river to a tap. It's more expensive, it takes more energy, and it takes more time. Also, while I personally am in no place to be purchasing riverfront or lakefront property, if I were in that position, I would be really interested in properties that were along a pristine river or a pristine lake. I would be less interested in a river that was difficult to swim in or that I knew was highly polluted. And so polluted waters can lead to a degree of economic loss. And then I also think it's important to note that local water pollution can have global impacts. A lot of times it's very easy to, I think, write off like a small stream in a community or in a jurisdiction because it's relatively small and maybe it has some pollution, but it doesn't seem like a huge deal. But local water pollution is never really isolated. It doesn't exist in a vacuum because streams flow into larger streams that flow into rivers, and eventually that water is making its way down into the ocean. I think a really valuable kind of real life example of that is the fact that individuals from our Tennessee State Department, the Department of Environment and Conservation, and also the Department of Agriculture are involved in a national nutrient task force with folks from 12 other states, all the way up to Wisconsin and down to Louisiana, because nutrient pollution in waters of all of those states are contributing to a dead zone in the Gulf. And so I was recently at a conference where I had heard folks talk about that, but I think it kind of goes to show that none of this is operating in a vacuum. It's all interconnected and creating bigger issues. Okay, GNRC is doing a lot to try and address the problem at our level. We are reviewing water quality assessments on a pretty regular basis. Those went into some of those maps and data points that I presented earlier. We are also aligning our regional plans to avoid incompatibility, which is something that I think a lot of us have touched on. In our watershed-based plans, that looks like observing adopted comprehensive plans and other land use plans in different areas to see how those might impact the long-term future of water quality. We also have an ECD team that tracks grant opportunities pretty regularly. And then the one that I'm most familiar with is the development of watershed-based plans. So every year, GNRC applies for grant funding from the state of Tennessee. We apply for 604B grant funding, and we get that funding to write watershed-based plans. And what we're doing with these watershed-based plans, we're looking at causes and sources of pollution in a given area, and we're pulling all the data together, and then we're looking at how those causes and sources of pollution can be minimized, and what we can sort of do about that. And just to kind of give you an overview, now that I've said the word 5 times, but a watershed is a common drainage area for waters in an area. I like to use the analogy of like a ring of mountains with a lake in the center and the valley. All of the precipitation that falls in that area is going to make its way into the lake, and that kind of helps delineate the watershed that we're working with. In terms of existing watershed-based plans, those are mapped behind you or in front of you, depending on where you're at in the room. We have the dark green is our completed watershed-based plans. The light green are the plans that we currently have in progress in Williamson County. I think Micah is probably pretty familiar with those. And then we also have proposed to create 2 new watershed-based plans in Montgomery County, and those are noted in orange. And when I talk about watershed-based plans, it's a lot of words. We build our watershed-based plans off of EPA's 9-element framework. I'm not going to go through all of these because I think I've hit on several of them. But we're really looking at the first 3 elements, I think, in today's meeting. So we're talking about identifying causes and sources of pollution and why streams in a watershed maybe aren't meeting their designated uses. And then we're also looking at what that means in actuality. So what pollutants are contributing to that, how much of those pollutants are contributing to that, and then how we can minimize those pollutant levels or reduce them using best management practices. So on the ground installation projects that can reduce pollutant levels. And as part of our watershed-based plans, we are out in the field several times a year. These are some of our field pictures, but I think it really goes to show the amount of time that we spend in the fields, because over the past 4 years, we've completed around 280 site visits within 14 watersheds. We've completed around 25 stream walks, or I call them stream walk adjacent activities, but you'll see one of the pictures is us kayaking. We're not really walking. And then we've also hosted numerous steering committee meetings with our local stakeholders to guide each of those plans. And I thought the next few slides would be fun to share because they're some of our observations in counties that may be familiar to you. So the pictures that we have up on the screen from left to right are from Dixon County, Rutherford County, and Williamson County. And these are pictures that we took while we were out in the field. So now that you all have had a chance to look at those, I'm going to show you what we saw in those.
Did I bring some cows down there? We're getting pretty dry, buddy.
Well, see that discolored water, so we had a party the other night.
Okay, great. So in that first picture, we have some bank erosion along there. It's a little bit hard to see, but it might be easier to see in the packet. We also have some water discoloration. That bright blue-green color can indicate high levels of nutrients. Maybe it's from fertilizer or things like that, and those can spur algae growth in water. In the middle picture, we have a nice fence there. The only problem is that it's kind of stacking up with some debris. And while it doesn't seem to be an issue at this point in time for that creek, if it were to experience a heavy rain event, that water might rise. There might be some flooding issues that we would see. Also, you can see the culverts in that picture. It's really close to a road, so not an ideal situation. The water there is also a little bit discolored in the background. And then we also have those cows in the stream, which is probably great for the cows on a hot day, but a little less so for water quality levels. But water pollution and water quality issues are not kind of isolated to rural areas. So we have some urban and residential pictures forthcoming. Okay, here these are. And from left to right, these are from Williamson County, Rutherford County, and then Davidson County. I'll let you all look at those for a second. And we're going to do a similar thing. So in that first picture in Williamson County, we have a very nicely mowed stream bank, which is great, but also less than ideal. So what would be ideal is if that stream bank had some tall grass really allowed to grow up, maybe some bushes, maybe some trees and saplings to help reduce nutrient pollution from runoff, also to help minimize flooding, and to provide habitat for different wildlife near that stream. In the middle, we have a picture from Rutherford County. Can't quite see the stream in there because it's in between that pocket of trees. However, there is some development nearby, which isn't an issue in and of itself, but definitely something to be aware of when it comes to water quality and silt and sediment levels. And then it's also a little bit difficult to see, but there is some litter in the shape of a shopping cart down there at the bottom. And then the picture from Davidson County, we have a thick mat of filamentous algae in the stream. So you can kind of see the way that that water is tinted all green. And a lot of that is because of the algae that we saw at the bottom of that stream. There is also some poisoning that's been done on the riparian buffer. And this buffer hasn't been mowed directly to the edge, but that is because it mainly consists of concrete debris. So that's not much of an improvement. Within our watershed-based plans, we recommend best management practices to sort of improve conditions like some of those. And this isn't to say that in every watershed, all of the sites that we visit are bad or that they have bad water quality. I just picked out some of the highlight examples for the sake of this presentation. But within our watershed-based plans, we sort of recommend a menu of best management practices to the watershed. And practices in agricultural or rural areas can include things like fencing, or alternative watering systems for cattle, grass waterways, filter strips, cover crops. And for more urban or residential areas, it could be rain gardens, it could be riparian buffers, it could be detention ponds, that good stuff. The benefits overall of having a watershed-based plan, the primary benefit is that they pave the way for BMP funding. So there's certain Tennessee Department of Agriculture funding that you can only access if you're able to point back to a watershed-based plan and say, I would like to install these practices. This is where they're at in a watershed-based plan. I would like to apply for this funding. And so one of the things that we're doing with our watershed-based plans is we're taking that barrier away so that folks can pull out our plan, point to it, apply for their funding, and they don't have to go out of their way to write a watershed-based plan. Watershed-based plans more generally are also great because they provide an opportunity to look at causes and sources of water pollution in a community. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for existing data. They also identify best practices for water quality improvement. And then one that I'm really partial to is the fact that we convene stakeholders along the way. We have steering committee meetings throughout the life of our plan, and it's always exciting to me when I log into our first call or I meet with a group for the first time and folks in the room already know each other, because that means that we're doing something right. We're getting the right group of people together to talk about this issue. And how you all can be engaged. One, if you're interested in watershed-based planning at large, Jessica and I will be here after the meeting. But also, if you're interested in a watershed-based plan for a watershed in your community, feel free to reach out to my director who presented previously, Jessica Hill. And also, there are plenty of ways for you to learn more online. So in the slides, there are linked to data viewers. And I would say to peruse those at your own risk, because you may not like what you find in there, but they are great sources of information. And that's all I have for you.
Connell?
Chair, where can we get access to the completed watershed-based plans?
Yes, we have them, and we're also working with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture to post those online. So we can send you copies, and then hopefully soon they'll also be on state websites.
So like many of these communities represented here, Brentwood, we have an environmental board, we have a tree board, we have a parks board. How do they interact with you all for resources and education and initiatives?
I think it varies a little bit depending on the capacity that we're in. So if we're talking strictly about watershed-based plans, involvement will look like involvement in our steering committee. Because we go back to the steering committee for a lot of feedback on what we recommend, kind of what pollutant loads that we're modeling, all that kind of stuff. But if it's external to that, I think that I speak for myself, and Michael can correct me, but I think that we're pretty good resources and kind of open books. So if you would like to engage with us in other ways, feel free to chat afterwards or give me a call or an email.
And Mayor, one of our biggest ways to get into a community is to use your advocacy. So you go back to your home community and say, we've got this resource regionally that might be able to help us out with local initiatives. You can make that connection and we can do the follow-ups.
David?
You mentioned that this opens up communities for grant funding. What types of projects or activities become eligible?
Specifically for that 319 non-point source grant that I mentioned from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, that is for best management practice installation funding. So getting those projects on the ground. There is similar funding available called Agricultural Resources Conservation Fund funding, the ARC-F grant. And that grant does not require a watershed-based plan, but it is suited and it's only available to agricultural projects. So the grants themselves are very similar, but the two distinct differences are that 319 funds, you can install urban BMPs and you need a watershed-based plan. ARC-F, only agricultural projects, and you don't need a watershed-based plan, but it's still helpful to have.
Any other questions? Mayor Anderson?
Some waters.
Now that is a question that I don't know I'm equipped to answer.
It's a good question.
Last day attorney. Candy?
If you would like to engage in a robust conversation regarding regulated riparianism, which is the formal scheme of water management we have in our region, I'm happy to do so.
Follow up to that.
Yes, straight
For an answer.
So in general, the state of Tennessee, it owns a lot of the water rights, but we as the people have specific rights as well. And then there are regulatory schemes on top of that that say what you can do with it. So sometimes owning something, and this goes back to our planning conversation, right? Sometimes owning it isn't that much good if the planning process means you can't do with it what you think you could do with it as an owner.
So in this example here, that she showed with the cows standing and doing their, just walking through on a cool day, it's through a guy's farm. Who owns that water?
I don't know who this. I'm giving you the lawyer answer. I don't have the context as to who owned that particular stream, and the answer would flow back to where. How is that stream attached to the greater water right?
Say agricultural water uses specifically are very difficult to regulate based on permitting. And so a lot of, like, for instance, if we went out to that property owner and said, hey, these cows really should not be in this stream, like we would like to fence them out of it and give them alternative watering supply, anything that we wanted to install would need to be voluntary on their part. We can't go out and force them to do that. It's all a lot of knowing who you know and kind of getting projects on the ground voluntarily.
I was just gonna say, if they're selling credits to TDOT for stream disturbances, it's the farmers.
Well, let me just, I think cows get a bad rap here. I mean, even the mayor Galvin said she don't have any cows. But, as an ex-water manager of the water system, that water coming out of that water plant can be pristine. What your neighbor does down the road from you is what you're drinking. Now, Rogers puts a hose pipe in a mud hole for a bunch of hogs to water and take baths in and what use the bathroom in, and don't take that hose pipe out. I don't care if he's turned off at the wall. His neighbor's gonna call me in about 2 days and say his water tastes funny. So, I think cows get bad rap. But we have found out through TDAC that when the mayor of Humphrey County about 4 years ago was asking about the fences and stuff and farmers needed help clearing out the water, they told him that they didn't give permission, nobody to go in there for equipment or anything. Next thing I know, y'all got flooded. So I think TDEC's got a lot to do with it, a lot to do with it. I had some water pumps. When the water got down slow, I wanted to put a little dam up to try to hold the water back so the pumps would work. And they told me that the canoers had more rights than I did. So really, it's who you talk to, Corps of Engineers or whoever.
Well, and we have constitutional provisions in our state constitution about navigable waterways. So it really is fascinating, but that doesn't help you, I realize, on a daily basis when you're trying to figure out, when you're answering the calls and dealing with that sort of thing. But it is a complicated area. And I think that's probably the thrust of what a lot of these watershed best planning like points out, is that you can't, there is at the end of the day, no way to isolate it. So as a regional body, we kind of have to be here and think through the bigger issues and address what can be addressed.
That farmer to not farm right up to the river would help a lot. But when he's paying $300 an acre for rent, he's gonna go right next to that river and all that nitrogen's running off in the river. And I tried to talk to the SES office about paying so much an acre to get people back off the river. They said they didn't have the money. You know, it's all about money. Usually is.
Time and money.
Just a couple of quick things. Appreciate the study here, but a couple of things I would make sure that we would throw in the conversation as you're looking. We just got through talking about losing farmland, and then we may ask a farmer to find an alternative water source for cows that it's a natural stream. Those two do not go together. And I can promise you every stream, every river, every lake has so much natural organics in it already. If you didn't put another cow in it, it's going to already lead to figuring out the nitrogen and ammonia when you do the water treatment plant. The other thing I would also be mindful of when it talks about polluted waters lead to economic loss. One thing I didn't hear, one thing that should be talked about, we've been talking with the state for 5 years, is water reuse. So I've done the testing and I can prove to you that the effluent coming out of your wastewater treatment plant is already cleaner than any stream or water that you have in your community.
I agree.
And it'd be easier to treat it. And I know the yuck factor and everybody freaks out because they said, well, I promise you, all water is already sewer water. You just don't like to talk about it. This bottle of water right here, somebody's drank it 7 times according to studies already. So I know you don't appreciate it. That's the truth. Just this one. This one right there. So if the state of Tennessee can get the regulations in place that needs to be done, they've been working on it for a little while, that will help a lot. We've got folks in here that deal with the Duck River, the Harpeth River, West Forest Drakes Creek up in my area. These things are difficult. We just need the regulation to alleviate some issues so we can go into water reuse in a more effective way. And I think that you will find economically will help us because it costs more and more money to treat with high organics. Now you've got the PFAS and the PFOS. I know you're probably looking at that already. Plus you're looking at prescription drugs. I tell everybody, don't go to the doctor, just drink out of a tap. It'll cure whatever you got going on. And so you might want to think about that, but those things are going to cost us so much money. And so under the Biden administration, the PFAS rule was going into 2029. I think they've already, Administrator Zeldin's moved it to 2031. If your water treatment plant hadn't thought about that, you better hang on. Because if you have to do enhanced filtration to get PFAS, microplastics is what I'm talking about, out of your water, you're going to spend way more money than you've ever imagined. And that goes right back to every ratepayer in your system. So I would consider all those things when you look at watershed.
I don't know why the DEMA systems get such a bad rap when it comes to water. Because Rogers, what, you got several in your county, didn't you? The DEMA systems. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, I wouldn't looked at it. That water coming out of there, I just assume drink that right there.
Well, it's been drank 7 times.
But we do have a water problem trying to hold back water. I mean, we're dry right now. The water table's down. We got to do something to start storing some water or something. Once it goes by you, it's gone. Right, Mayor?
That's right. Is he talking to you, Mayor?
Whoever's on the Cumberland.
Yeah, but then you try to get an ARAP permit to do a reservoir or store stormwater. That's another issue legally,
Good luck.
and it needs to be addressed in our state if you want to do something really about watersheds.
Any other questions? We move on to air.
Any more comments?
We've heard from the cow caucus over here.
I'm gonna hand things over to Skylar Ellis.
And as Skylar comes up, this is the last brief presentation we have for you. So I appreciate your patience. Skylar's going to talk about air quality, particularly in the context of emissions and our plans to help reduce emissions regionally.
I was ever worn the batteries out, Mike.
Not even so much said either.
You know, like, listen here.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, Director Skipper. My name's Skylar Ellis. I am also the other environmental planner here at GNRC. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about air quality and emissions reduction planning at GNRC. So very quickly, before we get into it, just a little cursory explanation of what we're going to talk about. So when we say air quality, we typically mean the quality of the air with respect to the amount of pollutants in it. It's bad air quality, meaning there's a lot of pollutants. And today, the specific pollutants we're talking about, while there are many different kinds, we are talking about greenhouse gas emissions, which includes carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, fluorinated gases, and some other minor co-pollutants. So these are emitted from various sources, including transportation, agriculture, big industry, and grid electricity, solid waste, and more. So to start out, just a little trivia question. What do you all think is the largest source of emissions across the GNRC region? Transportation? You are right. It is transportation. And transportation actually accounts for 44% of greenhouse gas emissions across our region, followed closely by grid electricity at 41%. And then stationary fuels, not pictured in our images here, but that is at 10%. Ag, forestry, and natural sources at 3%, and solid waste at 2%.
What did you say was 10%?
Stationary fuels.
No.
So why does this matter to us in Middle Tennessee that we have all these emissions? So first, poor air quality introduces a lot of human health risks. This includes risks for cancer, cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, and a lot more. Ooh. Oh, it's going everywhere.
You got it.
Wait.
I was fighting you on that.
Okay. Emissions also impact our ecological systems. Changes in temperatures, humidity, sea levels, etc., all determine where species live and how they interact, which can fundamentally alter our ecosystems. And finally, emissions contribute to extreme weather events, which can harm people, damage property, strain infrastructure, and reduce crop yields, which is also all detrimental economically. So now that we know what the issue is, what is GNRC going to do about it? So first, we are working on forecasting emissions and projecting potential reductions from varying strategies into the future. And also, like Jessica and Maddie mentioned, we are aligning our regional plans to implement various strategies. So that's internal alignment with SEDS, RTP, comprehensive plans, and the like, to make sure they all have an environmental conservation element to them, and external alignment with Knoxville and Memphis MSAs. They are working on their own emissions reduction plans. And TDEC, the state as a whole, their Tennessee volunteer emissions reduction strategy. So we're all working together to sort of align our plans on that. And then tracking grant opportunities. Again, we have a great ECD team who looks for a lot of different funding opportunities to implement various emissions reduction activities. And finally, the main point of today, we are developing an emissions reduction plan. This plan is being developed under the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program from the EPA. We received about $1 million for a 4-year planning period for that. And we are currently in our comprehensive action planning phase. So key objectives for this emissions reduction plan. One, again, developing projections of future greenhouse gas emissions and designing measures specifically to reduce emissions in high priority, high issue sectors like transportation, the electricity grid, things like that. And then we're also sort of trying to focus on a cost benefit analysis to pick activities that will not only directly lower emissions, but also promote substantial community co-benefits. So an example of some of these priority emissions reduction activities that we've been thinking about so far, you'll notice, again, they're mainly in our priorities of, electrification, fixing transportation, things like that. So we have electrification of vehicle fleets, public buses and commuter rail, expansion of EV infrastructure to just support, public use of EV vehicles in general, expansion of the transportation network, this includes greenways, and promotion of alternate modes of transportation more generally, public transportation, bikes, things like that. And then electricity, energy efficiency, we're looking into building energy efficiency retrofits and weatherization, and then the promotion of solar, wind, and other sort of renewable energy and alternative fuel types. And then on those sort of smaller, less high priority sectors, but we don't want to forget about like solid waste, green spaces, we have waste diversion and methane gas recovery, promotion of waste recycling, composting, and other beneficial reuse, and then the expansion of tree canopy and preservation of green space throughout the region. So in addition to those greenhouse gas emissions reduction measures that we're working on creating, the plan will also include these various other components. So we're currently doing our greenhouse gas inventory. We will also be, like I said, determining emissions projections through 2030 and 2050. And then we'll have our list of reduction measures. We will quantify those to see how much each measure will reduce emissions in the region. We will conduct a benefits analysis to sort of determine those other co-benefits that will happen along with the reduction in emissions. A workforce planning analysis, which will help to sort of explain how the workforce will change when these measures are implemented, sort of training, education opportunities we might need, and then authority to implement and some implementation guidance and resources. And we have contracted with ICF Consulting and EY to assist us with all these tasks. And we have a ICLEI membership that we're using for a lot of our data needs. And then here, I just wanted to quickly note that our CPRG planning region is a little bit different.
And for a lot of our other projects, you can see here, those counties to the right, Macon, Smith, Cannon, are typically not included in a lot of our other plans, but we are including them here. And we have those counties out to the west that are outside of our MSA, just to give us a more complete regional picture, make sure none of these more rural counties are being left out. So again, these co-benefits that I mentioned, in addition to just directly reducing emissions, we are also hoping to deliver cleaner air, higher visibility, and better health throughout the region, create good jobs and training opportunities in these sectors, lower energy costs for families and businesses, improve mobility options to increase convenience and connectivity in the region, and beautify the community and reduce heat island with more tree canopy and green spaces. So how can you all directly get involved with emissions reduction planning at GNRC? So throughout this planning process, as we create this emissions reduction plan, we might have a few informational asks of you. So first, you can help us to collect data about local transportation, solid waste, utilities, and other sources of emissions. So this could be us reaching out to you asking how many vehicles are in your government fleets or things like that. And then second, we would really love to hear if you have any local programs related to energy efficiency, EVs, multimodal transportation, anything that sort of directly or indirectly helps lower emissions and sort of works into this. We would love to hear about that as sort of inspiration, something to highlight in our plan. And then finally, we also would like your direct input once we're more into the deciding on our official measures phase. We would like you to help prioritize which measures by giving us your local preferences, telling us what you think works best based on the unique needs of your area and things like that. So finally, if you'd like to just learn more about the CPRG program or emissions planning in general in Tennessee, we have a ton of links here that when this is made available afterwards, you can click on all these and check them out. We have the EPA CPRG resources here, Knoxville and Memphis CPRG plans, and then more generally around Tennessee, the statewide TBRS plan, Metro Nashville sustainability, and Chattanooga climate action. So,
Questions for Skylar?
A comment, Mr. Chairman. When we look at the transportation sector as being the largest one at 44%, but we don't have enough conversations about bringing jobs back out to the rural communities that would reduce this transportation by a great deal. If you think back how it was decades ago when people walked to work, if you think about quality of life and energy and emissions reductions and things that would make that worthwhile, we all bring something different to the table. I'm from one of the rural communities, and we would love to see jobs come back out. So that's just, I would say, an opportunity to be looked into. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you. Other comment or question? Hear more?
Yeah, I would put one other source on how to engage, and we have a sustainability commission and staff that's dedicated to that. I plan to share this plan with them. A lot of those questions you just asked are resources you may need. I think they may be able to help you some of them. Sure.
Anybody else? Thank you, Skylar.
Thank you, and I am sending it back to Mike.
Thank you, Skylar. We have additional slides. They're in your packet. I'm not gonna read those to you. I did want to hit on brownfields really quick, though. We kicked this off with you last, I think it was October. We have until the end of the year to deliver 2 TDEC inventories of brownfield sites or potential brownfield sites across Middle Tennessee. For today's purposes, what I want to do is just make sure you all, Chris Barber in the room. Chris Barber is the contact that we would like for you to reach out to with information about who your local expert is in your community for brownfields, whether it's for redevelopment purposes or conservation. We're interested in knowing who we need to be working with locally. And many of you might have lists of sites that you think might be brownfields that could be eligible for soil tests or eventually cleanup grants that we can help you get. Chris will follow up with you to get that local information. That's where we are now. Our research team is getting close to wrapping up an analysis of tax assessor data to help us find clues as to where brownfields may have been developed over our history of development. But in the end, it's going to rely on your local knowledge of your community to identify suspected brownfields. Once they're identified, we'll go out and capture more information about those properties and make sure they're on your radar and they're on the state's radar for competitiveness and eligibility for the BRAG program that the governor created, I think, 2 budget cycles ago. So that's just a quick reminder that we are working on that regional inventory of brownfield sites and need your assistance there. And then lastly, I wanted to just make sure you're all aware of the fundamental role that GNRC plays is to provide a regional forum for collaboration, brainstorming, and policymaking. And when it comes to environmental quality, it's no different. We have an environmental roundtable that meets quarterly throughout the year. Some of your communities are represented in that roundtable, as well as state resource agencies and federal resource agencies and nonprofits are in this room on a quarterly basis, collaborating on a range of environmental quality issues. You've got in your slide deck more information about their objectives and the things that they're trying to influence as a group. Some of what they're trying to influence are the things that we're preparing for you, but it's also just a table for them to work together for whatever initiative they find important, even beyond GNRC's mission. Our next meeting is September 23rd. You're welcome to that. Details for that can be found online at gnrc.org. We've got typically 25 to 30 folks attending this regularly. Topics have ranged more recently and upcoming on water supply. We talked about water quality today, but there's also a brewing water supply issue in Middle Tennessee, just making sure that we can get fresh drinking water in the locations that are experiencing the economic development, which isn't always aligned with the source of water. So that's a hot topic right now. We're going to be unpacking the implications of that farmland preservation legislation that was signed into law by Governor Lee. And then you can see the list here includes continuing conversation about brownfields, solid waste. I hope our long-term solution for solid waste also addresses the methane issue that Skylar referenced. And then we use this group just to make sure that the infrastructure plans that we're developing and the economic development strategy that we develop for you on a regular basis are taking into consideration, as much as they can, considerations for environmental quality on the topics that we've presented to you today. So, Mr. Chair, that is our showcase of some of the work that we're doing across Middle Tennessee that will impact you all locally from an environmental quality standpoint. Appreciate your patience, but more importantly, your curiosity and interest in getting engaged in this work. And if you need a point of contact, you can go through me, but ultimately I'll get you connected to the right individual on staff for the follow-ups.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you especially to Jessica, Maddie, Skylar, and Chris for those really good presentations today. Chair report is more of a request than a report. About a month ago, Michelle invited Mayor Brown, Mayor Vile, and I to sit on a panel at the all-staff meeting. And the strength of this organization is the staff. You've heard from a few of those. So I'd like for those in the room to introduce themselves and what their title is, just to reacquaint you if you already know them, or to introduce themselves the first time. So we'll pick somebody out. Somebody's got to go.
Why don't we start in the back with Will and then go along the back line?
Hey, Will Rogers. I'm with Daniel's Transportation and Infrastructure team. I'm the Safety Planning Coordinator.
I'm Ashley Glasscock. I'm with the Research Analytics team.
Taylor Lee, I'm Transportation Infrastructure team and Project Delivery Coordinator. Matthew Cushing, Transportation Planning Manager.
Ashley Oval, Special Projects Coordinator. Kristen Scuderi, Chief of Staff.
Chris Barber, ECD Specialist.
Morning, Pete Westerholm, External Affairs and Partnerships.
Jennifer Lawler, Director of Research and Analytics.
Hey everyone, Andrew McIntyre, Transportation Planner.
Hi, Debrina Devnath Mukherjee from the planning team. I'm the Senior Planner.
Hi, I'm Hannah Sheely with the Research and Analytics team. Mackenzie Healy, Finance Officer.
Sylvia King, Finance Manager.
Angie Hutchison, Office Manager.
Anna Abelsager, HR Manager.
Sarah Fowler, the Director of Aging and Disability.
Rebecca Nopi, Community Engagement Manager.
Jessica Hill, Director of Community and Regional Planning.
Good morning, Dan. Excuse me, Daniel McDonald, Director of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Again, Maddie Bowles, environmental planner.
Hi, Skylar Ellis, also an environmental planner.
Okay, thank you. Michael, your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a big shout out to our team. We've got 85 professionals who work for you, come to the office almost every single day, at least Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday when we're not working from home on Mondays and Fridays. But they are all across the atrium here. You're welcome anytime to come visit our staff, but they do fantastic work, and I'm extremely proud of everything that they do each day. For my report, just want to preview some upcoming meetings of mayors. We have a lot of meetings that are always happening. GNRC.org/calendar is your go-to for that. But for your part, you'll convene again as the Transportation Policy Board on September 17th, and then your next meeting of the Regional Council Body is on October 15th. And then finally, Mr. Chair, I just want to let everybody know that we've been working with the Board of Directors and the Chair of the Mayor's Caucus to draft our annual Mayor's Poll and member survey that will be going out early next week. We use the survey to collect your input into what our legislative and policy priorities ought to be as we engage with the governor's office and the Tennessee General Assembly. We also use it to help shape the work program that we develop each year to be funded through the budget. So appreciate your participation in that. You'll see that in your emails early next week.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Any other announcements or other business?